I had them repeat that one line multiple times because it's such a paradoxical teaching. 5 times in the Gospels, Jesus says essentially, you must lose your life to gain it. What could he mean? Later in the sermon, we'll explore that. But first, let me remind you that this church was founded in 1866. So we're the first church in Lincoln. It wasn't called Lincoln back then. It was in 1869 that they named the town Lincoln. Not everybody was happy with that. You might forget there was a sizable portion of Nebraska that sided with the Confederacy, right? Not everyone was happy, but now I take delight in the name Lincoln. It has a resonance I love. When I hear Lincoln, I hear conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are equal. That's what I hear from the Gettysburg Address. Conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that everyone is equal. The name of our town has that resonance, and I love it. Do you know there are only 4 state capitals in the whole United States that are named after presidents? Only 4 state capitals: Lincoln, Jackson, Mississippi, Jefferson City, Missouri. And what's the 4th? Don't look at your phone. Don't look at your phone. Can someone yell out the 4th? Madison. Oh, nice. Madison, Wisconsin. Now, I love that we're named Lincoln. Do you know, last week, they found one of Abraham Lincoln's favorite Bibles. We always knew it existed, but we lost track of where it went. This last week, they found one of his favorite Bibles, Mary Todd, just after the assassination. Do you remember she was holding his hand when he was shot point blank? A devout woman. She had given that Bible to a friend, a pastor, and we totally lost track of where this Bible went. We found it again, and so this past week it has reignited a classic argument among historians. Was Abraham Lincoln a Christian believer or not? That's actually been a big argument. And, scholars, sometimes they don't frame the question correctly. The argument's been, is he a believer or not? Either or. But you know, faith is a journey, and it's more ambiguous than any either or, so it's kind of a false debate. Because they rightly know that early in his life, he was very unconventional, very modern, really. Do you remember, he was born in Kentucky, and he was growing up around those Kentucky tent revivals. And as a young boy, right away, he thought, that's a little over the top. And intellectually thin, emotionally overwrought, these tent revivals. So he thought maybe being religious was kind of ridiculous, kind of spurned it. Then he went to New Salem, Illinois, and as a young man, he was writing little essays about being an unbeliever. All his friends said, don't publish those if you're seeking office. You don't want anyone seeing these. He thought religion was ridiculous, but then he moved to Springfield, Illinois, and he started meeting Christians who were intellectual, Christians that loved a free play of ideas, Christians that had a way of following Jesus that looked authentic, and a way that was so wholesome and gentle. He started to shift. And then, in his later years, he started going back to church. Now, scholars have always looked at his great speeches. He used to say God a lot all through his career, but it was a political trope to always talk about God when you were giving a political speech. Everybody did, right? So they weren't sure, but later in his life, he began to feel a calling. It's pretty well attested to that as he died, he talked about going to the heavenly city. His life was a journey of faith. Scholars put it as an either or. You've probably been on a journey. I don't know what part of that journey you are now, whether you're a traditional believer right now or you're questioning most everything. It's a journey, and we try to honor that at First-Plymouth. So those opening words in worship, when I say wherever you are upon life's journey, I just don't mean a diversity of sexual orientations or political perspectives. I mean the journey of faith, too. Wherever you are, in the journey of the Spirit, I hope you hear something this morning that encourages you to keep seeking, keep growing. Let's bow together. Almighty God, we are here as your people on the journey of faith. Surely we have many different perspectives and understandings in this room. Now we join in a higher unity. We join in that unity that love creates, for we are all seeking the good and the right and the true. So may the Christ walk alongside us this morning, and might we trod his gentle path. In his name, amen. Jim, you have to let go or we will never leave this place. Jim, let go and take my hand. That's a conversation from 1983. Let me give you the backstory here. I had just moved to Boulder, Colorado. I was 19 years old. I grew up in Iowa and Ohio. Hadn't spent any time in the mountains. I'm 19. I'm in Boulder. And do you know Chautauqua Park? You can have breakfast there at the base of the Flatirons. You can just hang out, but then you can hike right up to the Flatirons. And so a buddy and we'd had breakfast, and then we hiked up, got to the base of the Flatirons in Boulder, right when the rock faces were starting to begin. And he looked at me and said, "Jim, do you want to try a few handholds of free climbing?" And I said, "Sure." Sometimes my mouth gets ahead of my brain. Have you noticed that here? I just kind of say things. I said, "Sure." I don't know what the risk assessment is of a 19-year-old, but I didn't know how to free climb. And so he goes, "I'll just show you a few handholds." But here's the thing. If you go up just a few handholds on a rock face, just a few, you're suddenly like 15 or 20 feet up. And I know it sounds silly, 15, 20 feet, but if you look back down, you could hurt yourself if you fall 15 feet. I'd only gone a couple handholds up. I look back, and it occurs to me, I could hurt myself, and every muscle locks down. I had one handhold, I had a foothold, and I just gripped in, and all of a sudden, every muscle in my body just froze, and I was terrified. Now, he was just one handhold over. There was an exit off the rock face, just into an area you could then just walk. He was just right over there. I couldn't move. And I started having visions that rescue helicopters would come. I'm only 15 feet off the ground. I'm 4 feet away from safety, but I'm locked in. And he says, "Jim, you've got to let go. Just take my hand." He could reach over to me. "Just take my hand. I'll just pull you over here." I was terrified. But finally, I let go. He took my hand. I was fine, but that feeling has never left my body. Just relaying that story to you right now, I can feel it in my gut when I had clamped down and was frozen. I want to talk a little bit about how we can hold on too tightly in many ways in life, that we can get this clench going, this clamp down, and that a big part of life, in lots of ways, is letting go some. I even think that we can hold on too tightly to the Christian faith. Follow me. I think there are ways we approach religion where we think there's something we're supposed to grasp and hold on. But my friends, the Christian faith is something so sweeping, majestic, mysterious, that it is by definition beyond our ken. So if you have clamped down on something, it's something that is less than the true, authentic faith. It's some version of the Christian faith. It's some version of your understanding of Jesus or God. So a big part of the faith journey is let go a little of your own understanding so you can grow and evolve. But we think this is what religion is about. Get hold of it, right? This is what a stout believer does. Get hold of this. We're not to grasp God. We're to be grasped by God. We're not to take hold of religion. The faith is to hold us. I think for many of us, we need to loosen our grip a little, even on the Christian faith, so that we can learn more. And I know if you're like me, I can really hold on to my own opinions generally. I mean, just about life. I can hold on to my opinions. Here's the funny thing about opinions. Almost all of us think we're right. I mean, that's kind of funny if you think about it. We can't all be right. There's no way I'm right about all of my opinions, but I kind of go along and think, well, I'm right, yeah, and I'm holding on to those. Sometimes I hear someone say, I'm a tell-it-like-it-is person. Well, you're telling it like you think it is. They always think they're the ones that see reality. I'm a tell-it-like-it-is person. Well, you're just telling it the way you see it. I mean, that's awesome, great. But we hold on to our opinions, and we imagine that we're right. You know, sometimes people tell me I don't preach enough politics. Other people tell me I preach too much politics, so I get it both ways. But sometimes when people say you've got to address policies more specifically, policies and upcoming votes and politics, and really, it's not just that I don't think church is the place for policy making. I don't really trust my opinion that much. We can all be wrong about what the next best political moves are. I don't totally trust what I would say. We have to loosen up a little on our opinions so that we can always be inquisitive and open to learning. Oh boy, we clamp down now on how we identify, right, with parties. Like, are you Democrat or are you Republican? This is interesting to me. Like, why would we clamp down on that identity? I would think every political decision before us, we should just approach as what's the best way to react to this? What's not by what party you're in, what's the most sensible, humane, caring, effective way to address our problems? But we turn everything into a party decision. We clamp down. Oh, golly. Tell you what. I want you to turn to your neighbor and say, whether you're Democrat or Republican, I think you're wonderful. Do it right now. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, I think you're wonderful. Ah. All right, did you hear that? All right. See, that's letting go a little bit. That's what it sounds like. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, I think you're wonderful. I think we have to loosen up just a little bit. We have to do this a lot in life. Like sometimes you'll clamp down on what you think you have to get after. You'll have ideas of you're after the big things, like your happiness or success or wealth, and you'll clamp down. But here's the thing about happiness. If you clamp down in your search for happiness, it becomes pretty miserable, this search for happiness. You have to just let go a little. It's like that with all the major goals in life. I read a fascinating book years ago called Obliquity. Obliquity. It thought that your major goals in life can't be approached directly. Like if you want success or wealth or happiness, the better way is to approach it in an oblique fashion, meaning it's lousy if you seek happiness directly, but if you find yourself caught up in some purpose in life or helping others or with friends, happiness sort of happens to you. You didn't approach it directly, it happens obliquely. Obliquity, or like wealth. We can clamp down and say, I'm going to make money, but the best way to make money is to find some joy and to be caught up in an enterprise of some sort, or starting a new business to help other people, and then wealth sometimes just happens. It's like this with all the great designs in life, but we clamp down, and life becomes less spontaneous and enjoyable. I think there comes 5 times in our gospel where Jesus is trying to tell us, you're holding on too tightly. 5 times he says basically, you're holding on to your life with a death grip. Your life, who you think you are, what life is about, your worldview, everything. Your life, but that you have to let go to gain a fuller life. 5 times he says, lose your life to gain your life. Sometimes I say that I'm 38% Buddhist because I love the Buddhist tradition so much, so just to kind of play with people's minds, I'll say I'm 38% Buddhist. But really what I mean is, I'm Christian, I'm devoted to following Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, but actually I use the Buddhist tradition to interpret my Christianity. It helps me understand at times what the Christian faith is trying to tell me. And sometimes Jesus sounds a lot like the Buddha, a lot. And in this line, this paradoxical line, it's like a Zen koan. You must lose your life to gain it. You have to let go to achieve a fullness. Sounds just like the Buddha. You see, in Buddhism, they believe that you are holding so tightly to your ego. Your ego is your sense of self. It's who you think you are. It's your opinions, it's your perspectives, it's your identity. And you really know your ego when you feel wronged, or when you feel you're in the right and no one's listening to you. That's your ego. And Buddhists say you hold on so tightly. Here's the problem. If you clench onto your ego, you're holding on to a smaller version than your true self. You see, the Buddhists believe your true self is much bigger than your ego. Your true self is infinite and more connected with everyone else than you understand, but when we clench down into our identity, who I am, you make yourself smaller. And so they say, let go some of the ego. Experience a fullness of who you are. For the Buddhists, they're constantly seeking non-attachment. We become so attached to things in life. And this it robs us of joy. But if you can become less attached to possessions or to things remaining the same, you see, the Buddhists believe all of life is ephemeral and transient. You can't clamp it down. Even if you try, it's a fool's errand. Life is transient, ephemeral, changing. You have to let go a little. If you walked into a Buddhist temple in Thailand, you would see something that would blow your mind. It would blow your mind. You can walk into a temple in Thailand. There are thousands of Buddhist temples in Thailand. You could walk in there and you might see Buddhist monks sitting before a rotting corpse in meditation. It's called corpse meditation. The Buddha recommended it, but in most Buddhist countries it fell out of favor. It's a pretty intense thing to be doing. But in Thailand, they still do it. The Buddhist monks will sit before a decaying corpse and meditate so that they can fully embrace the perspective that our bodies are transient, they're ephemeral. To not identify with your body so much. You are more than your body. And that if they can lose that attachment to their body, they can experience an enlightenment. Do you know in villages in Thailand, they will donate at times a body of a loved one to the temple, just like we do to science. Like we hope that it could be put to some good. They're doing the same thing, but they donate it to the monks because they know if the monks can achieve enlightenment, they'll help others achieve enlightenment. So they'll donate the body of a loved one for a corpse meditation. I know that sounds unbelievable, but if we can let go of this identity and discover a larger one. Otis Young was not a Buddhist. Do you know Otis Young? Pastor of this church 34 years. He wasn't a Buddhist. He had an incredibly expansive mind. He was open to everything. I know he wasn't Buddhist, but one of his core teachings here is very Buddhist. Do you remember it was let it go? He would say that all the time. In fact, he told me it was his main way that he would counsel people. People would come to him and they were holding on to even their problems so much. You hold on to what you think your problem is so tightly, and he would always tell them in counseling, you need to let go a little of that. Life isn't about solving every problem. Life isn't a problem to be solved. But we hold on to these problems so tightly. And so our pastor told us, loosen up a little. Just let it go. It's coming time for me to let go of this sermon. And let me show you how easy it is.